Now, moving along, and we're going to go straight into the UK, because today, of course, is Tuesday, but the raucous Brexit concern is upon us. With only 2 days left until British voters decide whether the United Kingdom will stay in or leave the European Union, polls show that the two campaigns on either side of the matter are neck and neck, tied at 44% each, according to the latest numbers, if one is to trust British polls. Now, all this, especially after the killing of British Parliament member Joe Cox, who supported remaining in the European Union. The murder suspect, Thomas Mayer, has been linked to right-wing extremists and presents himself in court, or had presented himself in court, as death to traitors, freedom to Britain. And so, amidst the drama, millions of Britons prepare for the decisive vote throughout the Isle, with many doing so across the continent, as the vote will affect many British expats who are taking up the call and working to involve their fellow countrymen. One central place where the battle is raging on outside England is in Germany. Let's take a look at the following report filed by i24News Berlin correspondent Polina Garayev. Break it down right after.
As the possibility of Britain leaving the EU looms over the 2.2 million British expats living within it, some are turning into activists, informing fellow countrymen on their rights and encouraging them to get involved. John Worth, a Berlin-based blogger, is one of those Brits taking initiative. Wondering what his compatriots think and know about the Brexit, he held in February, together with other experts, a non-partisan Q&A session for concerned expats, titled, quote, Brits, Brexit and Beer.
It turns out is that many of those British in Berlin actually felt they were not really adequately informed about what was going on. So we essentially gave those British living in Berlin a kind of a network of support.
Continuing efforts to get out the vote, Worth and a group of other independent Berlin-based expats founded a website informing Britons on how to exercise their right to take part in the referendum, and reminding them especially to get on the electoral register on time. The number of overseas voters included in that register, which was about 106,000 during last year's UK general election, has more than doubled since, and is now estimated to be over 250,000. Similar grassroots initiatives have been launched in all the countries with a large British community, in particular Australia, Spain, Ireland, France, Germany and Italy, says Daniel Tetlow, another of the website's founders.
They have stalls, they have campaign days, they have beer drinking evenings, they have all sorts of different events, sports events, to raise awareness, basically, that people can vote.
They are doing the on-the-ground work the government can't, believes Tetlow, but are also pushing authorities to communicate better with its citizens overseas. But while neutral attempts to increase voter participation ended with the June 9th registration deadline, efforts to influence both UK-based and pro-Brexit expats still continue. If the majority of British voters will decide to forego their EU membership, the informal expats network, built over recent months, will likely become a lobby organization for the rights of Britons abroad. But they will cross that bridge if and only when they get to it.
I'm joined in studio by political communications consultant Oliver Worth. Good morning to you. And of course also by journalist, blogger, expat also, Brian Thomas.
Hi, good morning.
Gentlemen. See, as I said to you outside of the studio, what I love about this entire story is that I'm going to get to speak to a lot of British people, and you always sound incredibly intelligent. But, Brian, let's begin with you. The world is standing in awe, so to speak, or counting down, because let's face it, if the United Kingdom pulls out of the European Union, that will affect not just the bloc, it will affect the entire world. First of all, what is your opinion? In or out?
I voted out. I voted by post. I voted, you know, there are grounds of self-interest that would say I should stay in. You know, maybe my kids want to go and live in France one day, or Germany. I don't. I'm done learning languages now. Hebrew's hard enough. But I looked at the history. I looked at where the EU came from, and I don't like it. And I looked at what EU does, especially in Israel, and I don't like what they do. And so for me, it's almost a protest. I mean, I'm out of Britain. I want Britain to be a sovereign nation again. I want them to control their own destiny, and I think that they can do it. I think that, you know, the 5th largest economy in the world can run itself without needing to be told, you know, what type of electricity they must have. And
well, before I'm actually gonna grill you to pieces, I'm wondering, Oliver. Obviously, you're voting to stay in.
Right, I'll be voting to stay in. And a lot of what Brian's saying, I don't find disagreeable. I think that as a large economy, Britain will be fine outside of the European Union if that's a decision that voters make. My primary concern is actually what would happen to the European Union itself. I think that Britain plays a very positive role within the EU, and whether or not we like it, the EU is going to exist whether or not Britain decides to vote in or out. And I think the lack of a moderating effect from the British, both in economic terms and foreign policy, would be very damaging indeed.
What about some regional accountability? What about being accountable for the rest of the bloc? When you said, when you said that you don't like what the EU does to Britain, what the EU does in Israel, what does that mean?
well, I look to the work of Regavim, for example. They go and they look and they see that the EU is building illegal structures in Judea and Samaria. And why? Why is the EU building anything in Israel? What's it got to do with them? Now, I take Oliver's point very seriously. Perhaps Britain can make things better with the EU, but I don't see that that's working. I see that there's a huge unelected bureaucracy that channels money wherever it wants to. I don't see the British having much effect on that. They've just had a vote in Parliament or a discussion in Parliament about foreign aid. And one of the things that brought that to Parliament was this idea that that British money goes to the EU money goes to the Palestinian Authority, and that goes to terrorists sitting in prison. Britain doesn't seem to be able to stop that at present on its own. So perhaps if it just stops giving money to the EU, that can help.
And I think everybody in this day and age, at the end of the day, we're living at the age of the selfie, and we all have our own personal concerns when it comes to voting. But on the bigger picture, and you know what, I'll start with you over there.
Yeah.
I hear you. Isn't this, though, not just the economics of it? Does this not go to the heart of where the European Union, actually where Europe as a continent stands right now when it comes to immigration? Is this maybe not motivated by the fear of foreigners?
For certain, immigration is possibly the core issue of this referendum. And you can see why a lot of people in the United Kingdom are very concerned about immigration. They're concerned about the fact that people are coming in from East Europe offering lower wages and the pressures that that's putting on some degrees the economy. The flip side of that is that immigration also provides many positive aspects to the economy. A lot of high-skilled workers are coming in from the European Union too, and also suits the United Kingdom the fact that British workers can go anywhere else in Europe visa-free and live and work. So there are upsides and downsides to everything. I think a lot of what the Leave campaign have been doing is quite disingenuous. The idea, for example, that Turkey's going to join the European Union and millions of Turks are going to suddenly arrive into the United Kingdom is very unrealistic.
Do you really believe that Turkey is ever going to join the European Union?
I can't see it happening. I don't think the value systems match. I think that's the big problem. That there's an enormous disparity in the value systems, and I don't see how it can work. I agree, I'm massively pro-immigration, but it has to be assimilating immigration. Israel is the unbelievable example of how that works. We've taken people from all over the world, from every corner of the world, but they're Jews. And they have a value system that we recognize. And that's why we're a massive immigration success story here.
Okay,
I would point out that I think it's also worth pointing out that European Union migrants to the United Kingdom are net contributors to the UK economy in terms of tax. So the idea that if there is an immigration problem in the United Kingdom, the idea that that's coming from within the European Union mainly, I think, is not quite true. Generally speaking, EU migrants tend to be high-skilled. They are net contributors. They study in British universities and input into the British economy and stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot to be gained. And only half of net migration to the United Kingdom from the European Union anyway.
Again, I don't have much truck with that, but what people are voting on now is the idea that Angela Merkel can take a decision in Germany to accept 1 million refugees from Syria, and suddenly through open borders, as Nigel Farage calls it, open borders for AK-47s.
But to be fair, Britain's already, and this is again another misconception, as you know, Britain is already not in the Schengen zone. So already these Syrians arriving in Germany cannot just turn up in Britain. Again, Britain and Ireland, the only countries within the European Union, I believe, that are not members of the Schengen-free zone and have these special benefits from within the European Union. So.
And though, You know, we're at this decision point. We're at this crucial point, which is saying, is Britain sovereign or not? And if they vote to stay in, a lot of people, I certainly believe, there will be a huge push to make that ever closer political union.
Is there really such thing as true sovereignty anymore anyway? Whether you're a member of the EU, the United Nations, every international organization diminishes some kind of sovereignty. Isn't that part of the trade-off?
You know, personally, my libertarian tendencies would say, I don't like any of those organizations.
So should Britain be withdrawing from the United Nations as well in your ideal world, out of interest?
I don't think I should have a say in that. I think Israel should be withdrawing from the United Nations. I think that everything's stacked against us there, and I don't see the benefit that we derive from being in it.
I'm amazed you're not running for government here. But first of all, this is fascinating to hear because one can really see the diverging ideas in that respect, voting in or out. Let's say, just really quickly, that it votes to stay in. You think that there will be an outcry in the United Kingdom?
I think...
A problem like, I'm not saying, you know, civil, you know,
no,
war,
the British just don't do that. I just don't see them, you know, raising arms against a sea of troubles. It's not going to happen.
Okay. I mean, listen, the two of you, this has been the pleasure of my morning. I hope to see you back here on Thursday or on Friday, because we have only a few seconds left. Do stay with us when we get back. A closer look at Venezuela, a country on the